So let's start this week with a question. Can you be a Christian and not be a disciple? I think many in today's church would say, yeah, that these are separate things, that a Christian is somebody who maybe they go to church on a regular, semi-regular basis, maybe they pray occasionally, maybe they put their kids in Christian school, but a disciple is somebody who is serious about their faith. They go on mission trips and they give money away and they pray a ton and they evangelize their neighbors. Christians are people who say, I believe, and disciples are those who are zealous about following Jesus and His commandments. Well, what I want us to consider this week is that though it's a popular idea in our day to keep these two things separate, it's not actually biblical. That according to the Bible, to be a Christian means following, learning from, allowing your life to be transformed by Jesus. This is an extra credit for the spiritual overachievers. To be a Christian is to be a disciple. And so what is a disciple? Well, here's a simple but I think helpful definition. A disciple is a life apprentice of Jesus by grace and by choice. A disciple is a life apprentice of Jesus by grace and by choice. And let's just spend a couple of minutes on each of those three components. So first, a disciple is a life apprentice of Jesus. So as you know, Jesus was a first century Jewish teacher. He was a rabbi. And rabbis in the first century, they had followers, they had disciples, they had apprentices, people who would come to them and say, teach me how to live. Not in the context of a classroom, but in the context of life, in the context of relationship. They would walk through the streets together talking about how to make decisions shoulder to shoulder. That was what it was to be a disciple to a rabbi. It was kind of like having an apprenticeship in life. It was like having an internship in how to be. And so a disciple of Jesus is somebody who comes to Jesus and says, Jesus, you're my rabbi. Teach me how to live. Show me your ways. Let's walk through life together and you show me what it is to be truly human. So last time we talked about how the gospel is news. It's news of an event that happened, news of what Jesus came to do. And we said that that news is good news because of what it means for you and for me. That we were far from God, but because of what Christ has done, we have been brought near to Him. But we also said that the gospel is powerful news. It's news that when it kind of makes contact with a human heart, it changes us from being just like totally committed to our way of doing things to become people who are committed to learning from Jesus, learning from Him how to live. People who come to Jesus and say, Jesus, show me your ways. Let me be an apprentice in your way of living this human life as it was truly intended by God to be lived. So a disciple is an apprentice of Jesus. So the second part of the definition is that a disciple is a life apprentice of Jesus by grace. By grace. So check out this amazing statement from the Apostle Paul to the Philippians. He writes, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill His good purpose. So a disciple is somebody who is learning from Jesus how to live, but Paul says the power to learn from Jesus, the power to follow Jesus in His ways, it actually comes from God by grace. So just as we are rescued by grace, so we grow and we mature by grace. It's not like God just rescues us in Christ and then He kind of leaves us to our own devices to try and figure out how to mature and how to grow. It is actually a gift of God to us, maturity, growth. Sanctification is the big theological term for this. It is God's gift to us by grace. So it makes me think of the first time I tried my hand at gardening. I didn't know what I was doing. I went to a hardware store, I bought some tomato seeds. I came home, I dug a hole in the backyard and I put the seeds in the ground, covered the soil back over them and then watered them. But I had no idea. I mean, I didn't know how to garden. I still don't, by the way. I didn't know how to position the plant so it would have the proper amount of sunlight. I didn't know how to prepare the soil. I didn't know how much water to give it. But despite my, whatever the opposite of a green thumb is, 2 weeks later, something began to sprout out of the ground. And I remember seeing it just thinking, this is a miracle. Like, it's like there's something magic in the ground. How is this happening? It's incredible. Now, of course, it didn't live very long, but that's beside the point. The point is, this makes me think of kind of our spiritual growth journey. You know, like we're trying, but we're often not trying very hard. We're inconsistent. Our attempts are at best kind of feeble and puny. Our knowledge is limited. But then all of a sudden, after months, years of sitting with our rabbi, Jesus, something begins to sprout. And it's like magic. It's like, where did that come from? It's like, oh, like before I would have snapped at this person, but now all of a sudden I'm a little patient, a little more patient than I used to be. Or you know, I used to be so hesitant to share anything about my life, and now I'm kind of opening up some of my brokenness and story to another person. Or, you know, I used to have such a problem with owning up to the things that I had done and really confessing it and apologizing. And now that seems to be coming a little bit more easily. It's like, kind of, where did that come from? And the answer is, it came from God's power in us by His grace. See, it's grace that can truly change a person. It is when my brokenness and failure and sin bumps up again and again against just the amazing grace of God for me in Christ. So when I fail and I struggle, I run back to the cross, back to that cross where I see the beauty of all that Jesus has done for me. And it's like, over time, as that continues to happen, the grace of God becomes bigger and bigger. It becomes more and more captivating, more and more wonderful, and therefore my heart becomes more and more willing and more committed and more passionate in following after Jesus. So here's the third part of the definition, and we've already kind of alluded to this, that a disciple is a life apprentice of Jesus by grace, and thirdly, by choice. Because of the amazing grace of God for us, our hearts become free to choose Him, to choose to follow Him, to choose to submit our lives to the wisdom of Jesus for our lives. When I see Jesus on that cross and all that He has done for me, my heart is enabled to want to ask Him questions like, Jesus, what do you want for my life? Jesus, what do you want from my life? Jesus, what do you have to say about my finances? What do you have to say about my sexuality? What do you have to say about my relationships? What do you have to say about my work? What do you have to say about my anger, about my worship? Jesus, teach me your ways. See, there's this willingness that is birthed out of grace. There's this choice that flows from God's grace given to us. So which is it? Is it I'm the one who is working to follow Christ, or is it God working in me? And the answer is yes. It's this beautiful mystery that Paul is teaching here when he says, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Choice. For it is God who works in you. Grace. Rankin Wilburn, in his great book, Union with Christ, he gives us a wonderful picture of this relationship between grace and choice. He writes, life with God is not like a motorboat where we are in control of the power and direction, but neither is it like a raft where we just sit back and are carried along. It's like sailing. While we can't control the most important thing, the wind that makes us move, that doesn't mean there is nothing left for us to do. We have to draw the sail to catch the wind. We must labor to be brought near. As a disciple of Jesus, you can't produce this inward change. Only God can do that in His power by His grace. But we can choose to do things that put ourselves in the path of God's transforming power. What are some of those things? Well, that's what we're going to begin looking at next time.